The North Gauteng High Court has dismissed an urgent application brought by the Helen Suzman Foundation to protect the rights of Zimbabwean Exemption Permit holders. The judges say there is no need in law for it. The three Pretoria High Court judges say their previous ruling in June this year, which gave 178,000 ZEP holders protection for 12 months, while the Minister of Home Affairs conducted a fair and rational inquiry into the impact of any termination of the program, remained operative in spite of attempts by the minister to appeal it. The judges say the foundation and its co-applicant, the Consortium for Refugee and Migrants in South Africa, were asking for what they already have by operation of law. The HSF sought an enforcement order after the minister indicated he was intent on appealing the June ruling by a petition to the Supreme Court of Appeal after he failed to get leave to appeal from the Pretoria High Court. Meanwhile, the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, has welcomed the judgment. And Dr. Dale McKinley from Kopanang Africa Against Xenophobia joins us for more on this conversation. Dr. Dale, thank you so much for joining us here on the late edition on SABC News. Perhaps let's start off with your thoughts when it comes to the Pretoria High Court dismissing that application by the Helen Suzman Foundation.
Yeah, good evening, Bali, and to your listeners as well. Listen, it's basically, as it were, in some ways, because what the court has basically said, as you said in your introductory remarks, is that the situation remains, that the enforcement order that the Helen Suzman Foundation was seeking was not necessary because they were afraid that if the minister was going to appeal, that usually what that means in our justice system when one appeals is that the previous order goes into abeyance. In other words, it gets put aside. Yeah. And they were afraid that that was going to happen. Therefore, he could then say, well, because that order is not enforceable, then I'm going to end the permits in December, which was the initial date at the end of the year. But what the court basically said was that's not the case. He can appeal as much as he wants, but the order remains for the 12-month period. So that's why the dismissal. So I think in some ways there's a bit of a lot of smoke here, but not much fire in the context of what was basically the case before the court case is still the case now after the ruling.
So when the judge said there was no need in law for this, basically solidifying that ruling in which we saw in June, saying that those ZEPs will last until June 2024.
That's correct. Again, what they're saying is that the minister is like welcoming this judgment, but it makes no difference actually in terms of the Department of Home Affairs situation, and it doesn't make any difference in relation to the ZEP holders either, because essentially what the fundamental issue here was that when the initial case was brought, the Helen Suzman Foundation basically argued that the minister had not applied his mind to the decision to terminate the permits, and then he needed to go through a proper, as you mentioned, a rational and serious process of consultation, and then explain why this was necessary. And then they ruled that 12 months should be a proper period in which to take place. The minister is obviously going to appeal. He's going to go to the SCA. If he wins the appeal, well, then we'll probably go into another process where it probably could go to the Constitutional Court. But for now, things remain the same in law, as the court said.
So what does this mean for those who have those ZEP permits, especially if you are citing that the minister may appeal this ruling? So what does it mean come June 2024 these ZEP holders basically now being told that there's no need for you to put in another legal process here?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, if nothing changes, in other words, if the minister basically decides and makes a case that he has applied his mind and he's got a rational reason for why he wants to end the permits, then when June 24 comes around, they will end. And the process then will be what it was with the minister when he tried to enforce this, which is to say that all of the ZEP holders must reapply. They must reapply for those permits. They must then go through the entire process again, or they must leave the country. And that would be what would happen unless, of course, what could happen, of course, as you well know, is if the minister wins the appeal at the Supreme Court and then the Helen Suzman Foundation or others appeal it to the Constitutional Court and make that appeal, then this could then go way past June. As we know, depending upon when the case would be heard, it could go according to when the court process finished. So it depends everything on the appeal success and whether or not that appeal then goes to the Constitutional Court.
And surely this affects, the lives of those almost 200,000 ZEP holders. I mean, they don't even know what's going to happen in the future when it comes to their stay in South Africa.
Absolutely. I think this was one of the reasons why the case was brought in the first place, was because there was a feeling that, these 178,000 people and their families, which, if you talk about that, there's probably about 1 million people involved here, are mostly have jobs, mostly are professionals or are skilled workers. They're not illegal immigrants in the sense of being here without documentation. They pay taxes, they contribute to the economy. And so the argument, at least from the one side, is why would you want that to end? Of course, the argument of the Department of Home Affairs is, well, this was granted for a special permission, it's ended, now we want to open up those jobs to South Africans. And we see this as part of a discourse that one can see happening in the lead up to the elections, to put South Africa first, take back our township economy, these kinds of campaigns that basically are saying that it doesn't matter whether you're undocumented or you're documented or whether you're here legally or illegally necessarily, we want you to go. And I think that's the larger context of this political debate, irrespective of the court cases, which will then play itself out both in court and unfortunately on the streets as well.
And Dr. Dale, what are these holders of the ZEPs saying? I mean, surely, if there's no guarantee that you will be in a job come next year, you will be in the country come next year, your life is basically in limbo.
Absolutely. I mean, when this was announced, for example, when the minister initially announced that this ZEP was going to end, people lost their access to bank accounts. They were not provided credit. I mean, imagine people having bought a house and they've got a bond that they've got to pay, and all of a sudden that bond is called in. Your school children, you don't know if you're going to be re-enrolled the next year. So it puts everything in limbo for that. That's unfair. That's not due process and due procedure. And I think that's what the court ruled on. In law, we have guarantees. It doesn't matter what your nationality is or whether you have a permit, or in this case, you have to apply the law equally. And that's a positive sign, because I think irrespective of our political views and our positions on this matter, what we expect of our judicial system is to apply the law equally. So in this case, let's watch and see what happens in the court cases, and hopefully what will be the outcome will be a just and equitable solution for those families and those people who have been in South Africa, many whose children don't know any other country than South Africa.
And what is the likelihood of this permit, seeing a further extension beyond June 2024? If you keep on saying that, wait, at the moment we are waiting to see if the minister will appeal at a higher court.
Yeah, I mean, the chances are, I would predict the chances are fairly good that it would be extended. I mean, not because the Department of Home Affairs and the minister wanted to, but because the legal process has not completed itself. And we've seen in other cases involving our own politicians and other high-profile cases, the appeals can go on for years. And in this case, it shouldn't be that way, because that would basically make those citizens and those ZEP holders not knowing what's going to happen. So I think there needs to be some finality. And my sense is that if rationality were going to be applied here, then the minister would say, okay, we understand that people are in limbo. We're going to give a particular period. We're going to set this period now that you can prepare for the next 1, 2, 3 years or whatever it is. And by that stage, we will end the process, and we'll do so in a proper way where people can basically take care of their lives. I don't understand, and I don't think many people understand, why the minister wants to rush this process in the context of violating people's rights. You're probably going to have a hard time in court making that argument, and that's unfortunate all round.